rabbi was visiting a Polish tavern in the countryside. He had a friend who owned the tavern, and as he walked in, he saw two peasants who were well into their cups and protesting each other as to how much they loved one another. And suddenly, Ivan said to his friend, "Peter, tell me what hurts me." And Peter, bleary-eyed, looked at his friend and said, "How do I know what hurts you, Ivan?" But Ivan's answer was quick. He said, "If you don't know what hurts me, how can you say you love me?" We all have those things in our lives that hurt us. And perhaps even my mentioning that brings to your mind some specific hurts in your life. But it seems to me that regardless of what those hurts are, and there are a variety of things they may be, because we want to protect ourselves from feeling that pain, we tend to hide those hurts from others. What happens, though, is in trying to avoid that pain, we bring on another experience of hurt, and that's the experience of loneliness. As you may know, loneliness it's an emotional state in which we experience powerful feelings of emptiness and isolation. So it's more than just the feeling of wanting some company or wanting to do something with somebody else, which we've certainly experienced that during the quarantine or the sheltering place, wanting to get together with other people. No, loneliness, and indeed many of us have probably felt this during quarantine as well, but loneliness is more an intense feeling of feeling cut off, of being disconnected, of being isolated or alienated from other people. The lonely person can find it difficult and even impossible to have kind of meaningful human contact. You may experience kind of a subjective sense of hollowness, feelings of separation, of isolation from the world. So more than just not being with people, loneliness is a much more visceral thing on the inside. Well, I don't know if you remember the opening monologue that Woody Allen gives in the movie Annie Hall. I think it's pretty funny. He says, there are these two older women at a spa in the Catskills, and one woman remarks to the other, "The food here is really terrible." And her friend replies, "Yes, and such small portions too." He goes on, "Life is full of misery, loneliness, and suffering, and it's all over much too quickly." Well, that kind of morose sentiment is one of the things, if you like Woody Allen, that endears him to you. But he's taking a humorous take on the reality that loneliness and these feelings do indeed touch each and every one of us. There will be some connection made in what he has said. It's why it's funny, and it penetrates to who we are. And as I said, the reasons for loneliness, they vary. Maybe we have lost trust. We've been burned by somebody. We have a hard time investing emotionally with someone with the candor and honesty that may be required. Maybe it's shame, the inability to admit that we're lonely. It could have come from our family background or a traumatic experience. Sometimes these feelings of loneliness are the societal forces that have emerged that actually make it harder for us to feel intimate and connected with somebody else. It's ironic that the social media, which touts itself on connectivity and makes it easier for us to stay in some kind of superficial touch with others, actually can exacerbate loneliness, our feeling of isolation and disconnection. So we may have friends in chat rooms or all over the place, and we know that those communications are fleeting, and the substance to them seems to evaporate the moment the conversation is over. And because there's a tendency to spend so much energy and time in social networking, often more conventional, traditional, and perhaps meaningful relationships get pushed aside. So, I say all of this about loneliness and isolation and these hurts that we have because on this Trinity Sunday, I want to speak for just a moment about how our understanding of God as Trinity can help us in these moments, particularly of feeling isolated. The fact that our God is, by very definition, a communion of three in one, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We know they are defined as love, and love requires more than one. It's the Greek word again is perichoresis, which is this interpenetrating dance of a joy, of everlasting fellowship, of love. So again, our God, when we affirm our God as Trinity, we affirm communion and fellowship and love when we say those things. Now, on the other hand, trying to actually define in a good way and understand God as three in one, it doesn't help us much. Why? Because it's impossible. I think it's one of the reasons God in the commandment says don't make a graven image, because once you make a graven image of something, you can control and manipulate it. And God won't be controlled or manipulated, indeed cannot. And so for us to try to actually define all of this is a meaningless exercise. But what's more important is the essence or the nature of this God, and we see that it is love because we see this in Jesus Christ. Again, the very definition, love, of community and connectedness and not isolation as we might feel in our loneliness. Well, one of the things that made Jesus so apparent in his love is that in history then and indeed in our time right now in this very moment, Jesus knows the loves and our hates and our hopes, our fears, our joys, and our sadness. As the fellows in the Polish tavern said, "How can you say you love me if you don't know what hurts me?" Jesus knows what hurts us. He has experienced our life. He knows what it's like to be betrayed and to be humiliated, to be on the margins, to be outcast, to be conspired against, to be ridiculed, to be physically abused. He knows our hurts, and he cares. And so he comes to us wanting to care for us and love us in the midst of those hurts. If you have been keeping up with the EYC and Gary Stanley, and again, I'm so thankful for his ministry with our youth. This last time they got together, they practiced safely their social distancing at 6 feet apart, but they had, it looked like yarn or something, that they had a grid of connectedness where it went to each one of them. So although I think he was saying we're 6 feet apart, we are connected. It was a tangible way to express the way to feel united and to realize that you're not disconnected from each other. It is an illustration, in fact, of Trinity, of God's connectedness to us. Even though we might perceive separation, He is always with us. Well, finally, here's another practical exercise that we might do as these feelings, which come to all of us, may rear their heads. And that is, at this moment, your feet, I suppose, are being supported by the floor or the ground if you're outside. And your body might be resting in a chair if you're sitting down. And tonight, when you go to bed, you're going to lie down and your body will be supported by your bed. Your skin is going to be touching some other part of the physical world. And that touch can be transformed into this little signal that God is watching over you and caring for you. You are connected. That's the point of this exercise, right? If I'm standing here, my feet are connected to the ground, to the earth. When I lie down, my body is connected to something. I think this probably works for everybody except for astronauts floating in zero gravity, right? We are always connected and touching something, except if we jump for the briefest moment, but we're connected. You might also think of it as in our baptism, the waters of baptism. You know, baptize actually means to dunk or to immerse. So we don't necessarily do that, but the symbolism is the same. So imagine yourself being baptized or immersed in a river, and those waters that envelop you are the waters that symbolize God's love and His warmth and His care for you, that just surround you and envelop you. So this Trinity Sunday, our takeaway is not to memorize clever illustrations to try to define the undefinable. Instead, it's to move to the heart of the matter, which is God's unfailing love and His presence in your life, and indeed in each person's life. And all of our attempts at a logical blueprint or defining of the Trinity, they'll quickly fade away because we can't do it. What holds up the universe, what holds us up and surrounds us in our hurts, in our sorrows, in our joys, in our times of loneliness and isolation, is the God of love who gives Himself for us. And so on this Trinity Sunday, as with every other day, love alone is credible. Amen.